Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. My name is Brent Frain. I'm the host. The show is also known as PWD Allies Podcast. Please check it out on your favorite app where you find it best suited for you. There's lots of variety of where to find the app, and I really encourage you to check in the audio version of it. If you're watching live, I hope you enjoy today's show. Today is going to be it's going to be a great show. We're going to be talking about wraparound supports for persons with disabilities in the province of British Columbia. Beautiful British Columbia, but you got wraparound supports. So today I have my panel joining me. I have Tom Pogson and Jeff Leggat joining me. But first off, I'm just going to go down a little bit of a memory lane here. Earlier this month, July 25th, 2024, I was welcome to call in, as well as other listeners, to our local radio station, CKNW. And I was really privileged to have the opportunity of speaking with our BC Premier, David Eby. David took some calls in and just talk about whatever the topic is, what you wanted. And I had a chance of asking one question. There was other questions I did want to ask, and kind of looking back at it, I don't really regret not asking, but I wish I would have been able to ask maybe about the CDB of no clawbacks off the CDB. But I went with what affects people right away with the cost of living in BC for persons with disabilities. As we all know, persons with disabilities are well below the poverty line in British Columbia and across the country. Every province in Canada, every person with disabilities, 1.5 million disabled Canadians are well below the poverty line. Unacceptable. It doesn't have to be that way. So with the question I had for David Eby at the time was, why did you not raise the rates? Because my landlord gave me a 3.5% increase in my rates, for the rent, but I didn't get an increase this year in the BC budget. There was $0 in the BC budget. So here, I got a little soundbite here that I want to share with all of you today, and it's just a little audio clip of part of the segment, and then we're going to dive into a little bit more of what went on with that conversation. So here we go.
But the one piece that you may not be aware of, and you should be, is we've increased the ability for people with disabilities to work and earn income and not have any deductions from their disabilities. So, Brent, if you are able to work, maybe that might be an avenue for you. And we've also worked very hard to expand the housing available for people struggling with disabilities to get into subsidized housing and have housing allowances that go beyond the minimum disability amount for people that are looking at risk of homelessness.
So with what that conversation was about, it was, in other words, if you were you struggling because we didn't get a rate increase this year, maybe just get a job. And that narrative, it always kind of resonates from previous governments. Get a job. I remember in Ontario, always from the premier in Ontario, get a job. That's what they need. And I know that. The minister that's in charge of the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction recently had said it during a town hall meetings and gathered up information and said that she had heard, Sheila Malcolmson had heard, that the best idea that people with disabilities was that they just wanted to have a job. I mean, that's great for people who are able to work. Maybe if they can, great, if they can get a job. However, with rates not being increased for people who have disabilities that are medically assessed and designated, and Jeff will jump into this part in just a moment, for people who have disabilities that are not able to do the same kind of work that they used to be able to do, or maybe they can't work at all, having that income support in place that's guaranteed, that it should be all automatically increased every year. Like, it was really shocking that nothing was in the budget this year. And so with the Premier saying that, it didn't really answer my question fully. It's like saying, well, again, like my landlord asked me, why didn't you get a rate increase? And I still don't have an answer to her because my question wasn't asked.
It was a deflection.
So yeah, it's a deflection. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Jeff Leggat first to start us off, and we'll continue the debate on that conversation, that audio clip that I played out.
Thanks, Brent. Let me just put some numbers in perspective. There's 6.2 million approximately disabled Canadians in Canada, in a country with 40 million plus citizens. Of the 6.2 million people with disabilities, about 1.5 or 24% need financial support, are unable to financially support themselves through no fault of their own. And I keep coming back to this no fault of their own, because the other 76% love it. Get a job, help yourself, support, love it. That's what the government seems to be focusing on. We have the ability to get a job and contribute to society. 76% of disabled Canadians do that. God bless you, government. They do that already. For the 1.5 million who are unable to financially support themselves through no fault of their own, including not being able to get a job because of discrimination, because of all the other, is it albinism? How do you pronounce that?
Ableism.
Ableism. I have pronouncing Tourette's.
Albinoism.
Because of so many reasons. People look at and I'm meeting with somebody today actually, because she's having a problem getting a job because she has cystic fibrosis, and people don't want to hire her, and she's amazing. So I'm meeting with her to get an idea and see if we can talk to some people and get her into a field of something. But not only do disabled people have a hard time finding a job, some of us just aren't able to support ourselves, or they can support ourselves at a little bit or whatever. But in the meantime, the 24% of all the disabled Canadians need poverty level financial support. It's like talking to a wall with politicians. They're willing to give billions to gas companies and corporations and billionaires and Nestle water, and give away all this kind of stuff. They're willing to let Loblaws hide hundreds of millions of dollars on offshore things. The government each year foregoes about $32 billion in uncaptured taxes because of offshore tax loops. So don't tell me we don't have the money to provide poverty level financial support to 1.5 million disabled Canadians unable to support themselves through no fault of their own. That's what we have to do. The governments, both provincially and federally, have to shift their thinking. 76% of disabled people work, contribute to society. There's 24% we are fighting for. So that's what we have to do, is focus on that, and to provide poverty level financial support with all these ridiculous bureaucracy. I'm gonna give you this, I'm gonna give you that, I'm gonna give you this, I'm gonna do these wraparound kind of focused benefits, but you have to jump through 73 hoops to get it. And most of the money that's coming into this department is taken up by my staff to make all these rules and regulations and stuff. So all the government is doing is paying their own staff, and the money doesn't get put in the pockets of the people who are disabled.
Exactly.
That's a lot of hoops to jump through.
Yeah.
ridiculous. It's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
I just wondered if Tom has a comment before, because I
Yeah,
kind of
I'll-
wanted to set up the show too, but if you have a comment
Yes.
now, Tom, you can go ahead.
Yeah, it was like with the subject of jobs, my head's buzzing as a a fan of and follower of the work of Professor Guy Standing. But I was like trying to think of how I'd do this because there's so many different directions I can go here. I just thought about how Joe Biden himself, say what you will about him, said trickle down doesn't work. To quote the Clash, phony neoliberalism is bitten the dust. So why doesn't David catch up, especially considering he's NDP, which is supposed to be progressive?
Yeah.
It's like we need to start valuing human beings first up front with in my world it's basic income, but money, raising the rates, all of that, and then they will, if like jobs. Okay, work is not just jobs. There is so many different kinds of work. Jobs is one of them. And if people have money, then they can more easily decide, I want to do this kind of work. I want to do this. Maybe there's work that they want to do that doesn't pay off instantly or doesn't like you can have a job where it's like something you always wanted to do, but there's not really enough hours in it. But if you have a decent, secure floor underneath you, you can go, actually, I do want to do that work because it's actually something I'm meant to do, which is the point that was made by Wilhelm von Humboldt of the namesake of Humboldt University, who said, you can get a person to do any kind of work and they will mechanically do it. But if you can get them to do the work they were meant to do, that's where they thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this idiocy of like, I don't care, job, just get a job. It's just brain dead. It's not thinking it through. It's holding to this neoliberal thing of people only have value and utility if they are working in a job. And it's like seeing jobs as being more important than people, which is insanity. And we need to break from it, especially as, being a basic income person, as automation keeps pushing. I was thinking about that this morning. Like one of the people he's not very famous at basic income. And in fact, he often says, check out the work of Philippe Bonparise and other basic income advocates. But Victor Schvetz has talked about how since 1971, the share going to labor has been going down, and eventually it will hit 0%. So why are we like jobs about everything instead of people's value up front? They will find the work they're meant to do, and we need to start learning to trust them. Yeah. And that's me.
100%.
Thanks on that. Yeah. That's so important to get that narrative out there, and I'm glad that you said that because jobs should not be what makes a person who they are in society. It's just a narrative that gets spun out there, and it's like when that Canada Disability Benefit, when it got launched, talked about it first. When I saw the word in there, it said working age disabled, and right away
it's always based around that.
Yeah,
it's always
I picked up on that wording there. And so they're going to go with that narrative here, and then of course, as we know now, $6.66 up to some. Yeah, what about all? Are we not all disabled? That are legislated as designated persons with disabilities. Like some can have it, some not, and that's what
sounds like you're asking for the moon there, Brent.
Yeah, it's not wraparound support, like it's.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
So over to you, Neil.
No, go ahead, Jeff. I think you wanted to.
I was just going to talk about the Canada Disability Benefit when I was more into it and all the regulations and stuff. I did an interview a couple of weeks ago. It was based on putting money into a distribution network, putting money into a follow-up assessment to see if you still need it, putting money into all these regulations attached to this Canada Disability Benefit. Instead of saying, oh my goodness, we have 10 provinces and all these territories that already have medically assessed and designated persons with disabilities, none of them are getting poverty level financial support. They all have a distribution system already worked out. Why would we reinvent the wheel and put more money into it? Oh, let's do that to put more money into our pockets and justify what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's what it comes across as. You don't have to, if you're really helping the people, then you're supplementing what's already being given. There's no4 this person's become magically undisabled in about 4 years or something. or this
Yeah.
person
All the re-reporting.
might not really need that money. Maybe they can actually get, get out of their wheelchair and do some work for a living instead of being lazy. That's the whole mentality that we still have with these government officials that try to nickel and dime the population while giving billions, while allowing billionaires to take billions and exploiting our resources in the amount of billions.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
Yeah, and
It's fiscally prudent. And like, couldn't we do 10 submarines instead of the 12 submarines?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, let's get back to like, if anybody's looked at the thumbnail for today, you'll see it titled with wraparound supports. It's in quotations because that is provincial government lingo. That is lingo that the provincial governments love to use. They say our social services are providing wraparound supports, or our BC Housing is providing wraparound supports. Our PW income assistance is providing wraparound supports. But yet, they just say it like it's vomit. They just vomit it out like it's nothing, right? But they don't even recognize the truth of what they're saying. And what I mean by that is, my struggle has been well documented. It's been 11 years for me of clawbacks, where they're clawing back a survivor's pension. And guess what a survivor's pension is? It's a targeted wraparound support. It's guaranteed protected income of a targeted wraparound support. And the government says, oh, well, we'll just ignore that. Like it's like cancel culture. We'll just ignore that perfectly good targeted wraparound support because your targeted wraparound support of a pension doesn't matter. It doesn't register. And the problem that we have, people can say I always harp on my pension, but the problem with that is it carries over to other things too, where now you have the CDB. The reason they're talking about clawbacks of the CDB too, and the reason why is because, you've talked before, Brent, about how our system in BC, it used to be based on pensions, right? It used to be everybody with a disability used to have a pension. It was back in, I think it was like really early 90s, like 90, 91, 92, or 93, and then it stopped. But the reason why they had a pension is because it was a respected thing. And now that they don't have pensions, if you have two support systems, be it from the provincial government or the federal government, you now have, they're in competition with one another. So you have the provincial government and saying to the federal government now with the CDB, well, this is extra money. So now it's on competition. So now we can claw it back. That's the way the legislation and everything is set up now. So if they see a competitive support, it's like, well, that doesn't count. We'll get rid of that. And I just want to speak truth here. Is like, again, and I hate giving myself an example all the time, but I hope people don't tire of it. But I just want to say that the fact that my wife died. And I have a survivor's pension. The fact that my first wife died, that I have a survivor's pension has zero facts, has no tie to the fact that I'm disabled. Zero ties to the fact that I'm disabled. They're completely separate things. But again, we're going to call back to when we had Dan Davies on the show a couple podcasts ago, where I talked about the Schrodinger's cat. I don't know if you're familiar with the Schrodinger's cat there, Tom.
Yes,
but this idea that the cat can be both alive and dead, and so this idea that a pension can be both earned and unearned at the same time. We don't have our criminal justice system say, well, you can be both guilty and innocent at the same time, right? Yeah. We don't have that. And yet our policies, our provincial policies are so perverted. It's like, well, you can have it both at the same time. It's fine, Anyway, I'll stop there.
There's a list. I was just looking up a list of current provinces, and this is the most up-to-date list there's current provinces. There's only 4 provinces in Canada right now, as of today's date of July 29th, 2024, that have committed to not clawing back the CDB.
Yes.
And those provinces are Manitoba, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and Nunavut. Okay, all the other provinces have not committed to not clawing back the CDB, the promised Canada disability benefit that was promised 4.5 years ago. I mean, come on, Prime Minister, like, what's going on here? Can you not negotiate with the provinces and make sure that no provinces are going to claw back? I mean,
Neil, can I just pop over there? Wraparound support. Are we talking about once you're on PWD, all the extras that you're supposed to be getting? Is that what that means?
I'm just saying that's the term that the government uses. Is like when they're giving any kind of support thing, you know, like they'll say supportive housing, like we're giving some wraparound support for supportive housing, or like our PW income assistance is wraparound supports, right? So they like to say that their version of assistance matters, but yet they can just throw out like a perfectly good, like that's what a pension is, right?
Yeah.
Like this idea that now for I don't know when it started, but this whole thing of competition between levels of government now, it's just like, well, if there's provincial government and federal government, they're in competition with one another and they cancel each other out. It was like, well, if you have a pension now, we're just going to cancel that out because that's too much income now.
Yeah, like, you don't want to be too rich.
You know,
you don't want to be too
we have to claw that back as unearned income because that protected pension, pension money, it shouldn't be protected.
They just want you to get ahead. That's, I mean, basically the government's like, it's like suppressing it down. I mean, and we should be we're a wealthy country. We should be allowing our citizens to, be up there where they have a comfortable way of living. I mean,
Tom? And this is what I wrote about recently with a blog about how we've set this whole thing up so it's like the individual versus the government, the individual versus the community, and then we wonder why things don't work. It's like, you know, it's like, all the grief, it was all the frustration at the 2,400 a year, 200 a month maximum CDB if you have the Canada tax disability tax credit thing, and then they talk about clawing it back. It's like it's like we just don't like you very much. It's like, and then but please work for us. Why? You know?
I know every time I hear about it, it's just mind-boggling. It does not make sense.
Yeah. It's like confrontational, which is idiotic as hell. It's just brutal.
I tried to pull my hair out, and of course, I don't much hair to pull out anymore.
I got to come back to this. I got to just break this down to simplicity.
Yeah.
If you're medically assessed and designated as a person with a disability in any province in Canada, the minimum level of financial support must be equal, no less than equal, or greater than the official poverty level of Canada. Period.
Yeah.
That's what we have to attain. That's what the federal government has to put into law.
Yeah.
That's what the provincial governments have to accept as law.
Yeah.
And that's where we have to go. We don't give a owl's hoot where the money comes from, provincially or federally. I'm a Canadian. I'm not a British Columbian. I'm a Manitoban. Wherever I want to go in Canada, I'm a Canadian. So all this bull crap about strings attached and where the money's coming on competition and who gives it from where, no one's seeing the tree through the forest. The tree is being ignored. The tree is poverty level financial support is the minimum for any and every. How do we get that across? Because all the rest is just all the rest is just gravy. All the rest is just confused gravy in the meantime.
Yeah. And the poverty level isn't even as high. Like, it's not like if you're living on the poverty level itself, you're living large. So one of my pinned things on Instagram is how everything is far lower than it actually should be, far lower. The poverty level should actually be higher, but you should at least be at 2,200, not like, 2,200, lucky you. Like that should be like, well, of course, you know.
Well, I mean, and as each year ticks by with them not doing that, that number just keeps climbing higher and higher, and that kind of leads back into the conversation that I had on CKNW, like. You have to cut back somewhere else in order to compensate to pay your landlord. So really, it actually puts a person into deeper poverty rather than actually, having an obligation of at least tying it to inflation. And BC has not done that. Again, I mean, Ontario.
The whole thing of when David Eby responded saying, just get a job, Brent, it was very kind of condescending, right?
Oh,
and I don't know. Tom, are you familiar with the jingle of from Friends? I'll be there for you when the rain starts to fall. I'll be, that theme song from Friends, right? That's always what the government wants us to believe is like we'll be there for you. And remember, we had John Horgan say, "I've got your back," right?
Oh, right. Yes.
I've got your back, and now they say like we'll be there for you. Well, I want to sing a song of what truth is. If they were going to sing this song, if you had David Eby and Sheila Malcolmson singing a song together, this is what the true song would be. Ready?
Yeah.
We'll be there for you to claw back your pension. We'll be there for you to take away your EI. Will be there for you to claw back your workers' compensation because you don't deserve it, because the truth doesn't matter of what income really is. Right? I mean, that's what they should make their whole campaign on is we'll be there for you to claw back your pensions. So please get a job so we can claw back your pension. Please get a job so we can claw back your EI. Please get a job so we can claw back your workers' compensation. Right? Right?
We can claw back that too.
We'll claw back everything. Just please get a job, and then we can claw back everything. Right?
Yeah.
Well, there was.
I'm reminded. Sorry, I'm just going to get. I'm reminded that a bit from Blackadder. If you've ever seen Blackadder Goes Forth, where he's like, just know, because it's set in World War I, that Captain Darling and I are behind you. Yes. 2,400 miles behind you.
I gotta come back, Neil, to say also the point that comes back to what you were saying about the wraparound and the pension and the clawbacks. If you're a medically assessed and designated person with disability who needs financial support, you should get poverty level financial support no matter what. Mm-hmm. Any assets you have above and beyond can accumulate up to a point where you are comfortable before there's any clawbacks included.
That's what it should be.
So an extra $200,000 or $300,000 in your bank for your retirement for whatever. Yeah. None of this nickel and diming right off the bat to make sure that you have to you have to buy craft dinner each month because you're not going to get the money that you're supposed to be getting. That's the thing. That's the thing that comes with dignity and everything else. And to pile on what Tom said, it's about participating in community. If you know what I mean, it's about having the dignity and the bills covered to be able to participate in community and choose how you want to contribute or how you're best able to contribute to community, not being forced to work at a meaningless job simply to pay taxes or to, you know what I mean?
And you know where it starts too, is this whole thing of income of last resort. That's the first lie. That's the first lie that they tell you. It's income of last resort. Yeah. We have no obligation to actually help you. Yeah. It's set up as a charity. It's income of last resort, and that's a really big lie, right? I mean, it's just huge. And and I mean, I don't want to make this personal. I don't like to pick on people, but I said last time when Dan Davies was on, how much I used to love Perry Mason, because I just love this idea of the good guy always wins, and righteousness matters, and justice matters, and all of that, right? Like doing the right thing matters. It's morals, right? And I know that David Eby, again, used to be the Attorney General, which means he used to, when he was a lawyer in his past life, he used to take on a lot of human rights cases, right?
Yeah.
And so he was in charge of the Human Rights Tribunal, and back when, so he was in charge of the Human Rights Tribunal for about 5 or 6 years, and I sent him, when he was the Attorney General, I sent him at least 24 emails saying, can you please acknowledge the truth of what a pension actually is? Can you please acknowledge the truth of what a pension actually is, and tell me why a clawback is justice, and tell me why a clawback is righteousness? And I didn't hear nothing. I heard crickets. 24, 20, no response whatsoever. Nothing nothing from his office. And like this whole idea that we have our current BC Human Rights Tribunal, like they're not interested in truth. They don't want to hear truth. I tell them that this whole clawback thing is all a bunch of pink unicorns.
That's that phrase that you can't handle the truth.
Yeah, I know. Like I just feel like going Jack Nicholson on everybody. You can't handle the truth, like that. I mean, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like the truth. Why? I know that David Eby, again, and not to pick on him, but I know he's a parent, right? I know he's got kids, and as a parent, one of the things you tell your kids is telling the truth matters. It's like, you don't tell a lie. Telling the truth matters. And so you're gonna tell me that David Eby, the parent, and David Eby, the politician, is going to be completely different and say, well, it doesn't matter. The truth of a pension doesn't matter, and the truth that we're screwing over people with disabilities, it doesn't matter because they're only people with disabilities. So it's a different standard.
That's an interesting point when you said it's financial support as last resort, and the government, the government's not financially, it's not obligated to support people who are unable to financially support themselves.
Yeah,
I disagree. This is Canada. This is a first world country. It's our obligation to take care of
exactly.
The community.
Yeah.
When the government starts to skew that, in the name of greed or whatever, it's time for us to take that back and say no.
100%.
You make
100%.
Because there was there was a part in the CKNW in the phone-in show when David Eby recognized, I don't want to do quote unquote what he said, but if people want to look back in the vault, they can hear the response. But he did recognize, but he didn't commit to. He deflected it off, where he did recognize that, that the government's looking into, in so many words, they're looking into the rates. But he did mention that 16 years of previous governments, that they may have raised the rates, but maybe not so much. Again, that's 16 years. I was taught by a politician, and I'm not going to put the name out there. The person watching it will know who I'm referring to. But I was taught that, don't keep blaming 16 years or 7 years, 16 years, 7 years, work together, because we know what disabled people went through for many years, right? I get it, because I lived through it. I lived through trying to be reassessed to see if I was still disabled. And I will never, ever forget the trauma that it put me through, anxiety and stress. I went 3 months with no freaking income, couldn't pay my rent. I was almost evicted. It was crazy. Sure, it got reinstated. I got back pay. And here's $500 for your inconvenience too on top of it. Oh, do I have to pay it back? No.
And don't try to pat yourself on the back every time you do an incremental increase, which means nothing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which
Like go a
is
year
so
and skip a
Once in
year.
a lifetime. Yeah.
Which is so pitiful. It doesn't even 666 a day doesn't even do anything to get someone out of poverty or add dignity or add self-respect or add anything. Don't pat yourself on the back. None of that. No. We don't accept that.
I just wanted to clarify what I said and what you said, Jeff, is that when I said that there's no obligation, I'm saying that the government thinks that. I'm not saying that they actually don't. I'm saying that the government thinks that. That's the mentality of the government. Not what I say. It's what the government the government is put forwarding this idea that it's income of last resort and this whole thing is charity. And that's all we're on the hook for is this whole charity thing, and that's it.
That's a mentality of failure of society. That's a mentality of failure of a nation. That's a mentality of failure of a community. No, that's unacceptable. It's not Canadian.
Yeah, and it really comes down to the government's looking at their policies. And I remember Dan Davies, the MLA for that's at Fort St. John, Peace River North, and from the BC United Party, formerly BC Liberals. He had mentioned too in our last conversation we had was telling the disabled people and everybody else, just look at the policies. Look at the policies on who you want to vote for, who has your best interest, And so again, BC NDP, like you are in government right now, right? Your policies, I mean, you want to bring people up to the poverty level, like show us a goal, like where are you at of achieving like steps here? Like we've taught you what we need. We're telling you what we need. But again, if you point a year, skip a year, giving it to some parts of the disabled community where other ones, well, you're in subsidized housing, you don't need that 125. You had to prove that your rent went up to 375 at the time. Right. So, and then they said, well, here's 125 to part of you last year, but this year, you don't need anything. It doesn't work that way. Like society, your landlord, like I said in the interview, was, well, we got a rent increase. And my landlord still said, she doesn't understand. She goes, it doesn't make sense to me, Brent. I go, well, can the government actually increase rates? Of course they can. It's a policy choice of the reasons why they don't want to do that. I go, why? Well, ask if you get a chance. Maybe the premier will come onto the radio. Well, go figure.
And also too, like the last comment he made when he was talking about housing, he says, "Well, we're doing all these things for housing for people with disabilities." Well, that's not being truthful either, because if you're going to be truthful, you say our BC Housing is providing housing for 12% of people with disabilities. 12%. That's the truth of it.
Yeah, and they're saying if you're fleeing homelessness, well, what if you're not homeless and you just want cheaper housing because the cost of living's high? But then you got to meet. But what they're not saying is that you got to meet the guidelines within their policy. So if you are to say you have a friend or you have a neighbor, maybe they're looking for a place, and say, hey, do you want to move in with me? We can get the BC Housing. And you may know each other. I mean, you may be acquaintance or you're just a friend. But as soon as you move in together, according to BC Housing, you need to be in a relationship. And if you are two PWD, you need to be under one file, one income, one file, and but you have to be in a relationship. You can't be friends. You can't be just acquaintances or roommates. It doesn't fall under their guidelines. So that's another regulation that needs to be abolished. It needs to be abolished. They delete. Give me the delete key. I would delete all these regulations. Take them all out of there. Right? Just reboot. It needs to be a complete reboot.
I gotta pop off here. Sorry, guys. I have another appointment. Okay. Based on what Brent says, if you're a voter and you're disabled living in British Columbia this fall, NDP is not got our back. Mm-hmm. If you are, does United have our back? I don't know. Does anybody else have our back? I know the Green Party is one that would actually fight for us and has stood up for us in this province. and vocally had us at press releases, press conferences, and it is a very prominent and respected voice in the House of Commons. So I'm going to encourage 147,000 fellow persons with disability in BC to go green this fall. We will still work with anybody, NDP, United, whatever. It's not a bipartisan issue. It's not a political party issue. It's a human rights issue. It's a human dignity issue. So let's go with that. Tom, have a wonderful trip. Thanks, guys, for having me on.
And thank you, Jeff.
And sign Brent's petition.
Oh,
yes.
Petition.
E5047.
Yeah, E5047. Just Google it and sign it. We're what is it? 160 signatures
We're
away.
at 339 signatures out of 500. We need to get it past that goalpost of 500 minimum.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
You gotta run back.
Okay. We'll see you soon, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you for coming up.
Okay, well, I just wanted to hop on what you just said, Brent, about what did you just say? Now, see, I was holding on to that in my head for so long, and now I've lost it now. So maybe just keep talking, and then I'll pick up on it.
I was thinking about you mentioned with charity. And I think that's the whole problem right there, is that it's still all focused on charity, or especially since the neoliberal kind of when they had the fall of the Berlin Wall, everyone went kind of Washington consensus. Okay, free market, neoliberal capitalism is the only way, and so it all got focused as it's all charity. And when you have something as charity, it's like, oh, look what nice thing we're doing for you, or whatever. And well, who do we get the money to? Whereas if something is a right, like a pension, for instance, then it's like, oh crap, we haven't taken care of this person's rights. Oh shit, we need to get it above 12%. Oh my God. Right. Then all of a sudden that changes the whole narrative of it. It's like the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, Article 25, basically screams basic income, or at least basic income for disabilities. That's literally in there. And in fact, it's there in like 3 different places. The what is it? The part in the I can never remember which. I think it's Article 7 in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The what is it? Security of the person.
I think it is.
It's like these are 7, like it's like we need to come back to that rights-based approach. Yeah. And within that, you have like it's a more strengthened thing. It's a universalistic, where it's like, because it's everyone defends it. Like our healthcare system, like our healthcare system, like we wouldn't be very happy if our healthcare system started getting eroded, because that's everyone. Every Canadian gets it, and it's like, right, every Canadian should have the right to an income that's sufficient for life, regardless of what happens. End of story. We can put things on top of it, but the idea of do we have to do that? Yes, it's a right.
Yeah, and I'm glad you.
Oh, we should do that because we feel bad. Yeah. No, it's a right.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned the right thing, because it actually jogged my memory. Is when you were saying about all those restrictions for the BC housing, when you checked and you said, well, if you're not married, then sorry, and if you have to meet certain criteria. If you don't meet the certain criteria, sorry, and again, going back to the thumbnail, if you check the thumbnail, there's a reason why I have everybody mummified, wrapped up in cloth, mummified. Is this idea that we're all restricted, right? We're all like this, like we can't move, we can't do anything, because it's like we're getting the life sucked out of us. Yeah, and they say it's targeted support, targeted supports. Targeted wraparound supports. Meanwhile, like everything is so restrictive, and saying, well, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. Don't get married, or we'll punish you. If you get a job, we'll claw back your pension. If you get a job, we'll claw back your EI. If you get a job, we'll claw back your workers' compensation. So please get a job.
Yeah. And so I want to kind of emphasize this for some of our listeners and our viewers. Just to kind of look back at memory lane regarding BC housing, their policies. Like what we're talking about today is about regulations. And so anyone looking into BC housing, I'm not here to tell people what kind of housing they should live in and what kind of housing they shouldn't live in. I say that people should be able to live in whatever housing they want and what community that they want. Now, if you want to live in BC housing because rents are rent geared to income, and everyone knows we are in a housing crisis, right? And housing takes time to build. So if person's living in wherever they're living right now and they're struggling because of the cost of living and their majority of their income's going to high market rent, okay, well then maybe lower the taxes down. Could be one idea, municipal taxes, but make a deal with the corporate landlords and say, okay, we're going to make rents cheaper, but you now have to look at working with the recipient. That could be an idea. I don't know. I mean, I'll probably get some flack on that one, I'm sure. But otherwise it's like subsidizing it. Or better yet, just give everybody a basic income, get it up to a level. Now people can live and be where they want to live in. But getting back to BC housing, the regulations, I was astonished because I didn't know all these questions. And I started asking questions. Well, the person I spoke to got very irritated with me on the phone because I was asking way too many questions. Well, rightfully so, right? I mean, shouldn't I be asking questions of maybe of an atmosphere that maybe my fellow neighbors or people in the community are looking for housing because they can't find housing that's affordable? So when I found out that people with disabilities, yes, they can apply and go on a waiting list. Now I hear it's up to 14 years minimum. Wow. Yeah, but if you're fleeing violence or you're a single mother, single father, they're going to take preference. And I was told they're going to take preference with families with children, and rightfully so, right? I get it. I mean, getting basic families with children into housing. Yes, children should not be living in tents, right? Nobody should be living in tents. And that's another whole topic in itself, and I'll get there if we have time on the podcast. But, when I found out about it's a whole umbrella of a network, like seniors housing, right? So seniors can still live in their traditional housing where they are, but they're still, they apply for SAFERS, which is a seniors supplement part of BC housing as an extension off of them, which is great because my mom, once upon a time, lived in her own home. She called it her own home, but it wasn't her own home. She rented, but she had lived in there since I was a little baby. So I always knew it as my home. And it became time in life where I said, well, I'm going to be moving out eventually, Mom. And she's like, okay, well, but her age she was getting up there. I mean, she worked her ass off, and I don't mean to swear, hopefully nobody takes it offensively, but she was effing pissed off at the government because that they wouldn't raise the rates high enough for shelter. And I call it shelter, that name shelter, just, no. But anyway, that's just what industry calls it.
Are we dogs? Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just industry in general calls it shelter. And I was just like, wow. Okay. But my mom got so mad because she's like, when it comes time for you to move out, is your income going to be high enough on your shelter portion? She goes, why do they have that in that categorized? Your check is your check. And I go, exactly. So why don't they just remove it? I go, I don't know. And I didn't know much about all the advocacy stuff, how all that worked way back when. And I said, well, I'll ask questions. No, Brent, don't ask questions. You just go with it. And I go, well, no, I should be asking questions. I mean, will that be enough to basically pay a corporate landlord? And I used to ride my bike by a place where I rented. And future, I ended up renting at the place, not knowing I was going to live there, but the rent was higher, almost a little bit higher than what my shelter portion was. So it came out of my support. And as time went on, the rent started going up and up. Oh boy, but I looked at that, and my mom had said, well, yeah, okay, that's the scenario you're looking at, but you're still living here. So she had applied for SAFERS. My brother and I lived with her, and under the BC housing umbrella, right? Her rent was subsidized. So it worked good for her because she just had to pay out of her pocket, and then it got topped up as a subsidy to give to her landlord, which the agreement was you keep her rent low as long as she did fix-ups herself around the house. So it worked out well. And I said, well, eventually I'm going to be moving because I saw a place that I'm looking at. And she goes, okay, can you afford it? I go, well, I'll do the best I can. I'll work at my part-time job and And that worked out well. I never thought, okay, well, I'm never going to be able to do that kind of work again in my life, but it ended up being that way going forward, fast forward in time machine. But present time back then was, my brother's income was higher than what the household income was allowed for her to keep having all of us living under one household. So the fact is that BC Housing government caused a friction in the household. My mom, it caused her health condition to start deteriorating. I didn't realize that at the time. I thought it was just, one nature is just the way that it's going in life. And my mom explained that she knew that something was going wrong with her, but she didn't know what. And the doctor diagnosed it as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. So then she started developing dementia as time went on, right? But it was because she knew that my brother had moved out because of the income. He wasn't allowed to live there. The household income was too high. So now it was just me and her. And she said, well, thank God that you're still living here, because I don't know what I would do if you moved out, because the income wasn't going to be high enough to, And so it came time where I had to move, where I said, I'm going to be moving. Well, we got a boarder in to help my mom out financially with that. It didn't work out, unfortunately, for my mom. Because she missed her family, right? Because my brother was now gone out of there. I was now gone. She felt that her family was now leaving her because she blamed the government about it. Again, about a government policy that state, that if they would have given her enough income on her pension to live comfortably, maybe she might have lasted more years. I'm not saying that government has caused her to pass away, but my mom had, as she said to me at the time, in confidence, that she felt that government regulations were too stringent and that things needed to change going forward. And I said, well, I'll do the best I can, and to keep her comments floating to help blossom the future for future generations, right? And so that's how I got into advocacy, everyone. Like, it was I saw things that needed to change to try to make things better. When I got off the phone, BC Housing, when they told me all these things, I told them the story about my mom. He said, I'm so sorry. I go, right, the system needs to change. So this is where we're at. So when government says, well, we've got BC Housing for people that are fleeing, to stop from getting to homelessness, well, why not prevent the problem before it gets to that point, right? Mm-hmm. Work with the individuals and see what method is best. So that's my rant for the day regarding that. I just want people to kind of look at the scenario. Yeah,
if you're going to offer housing to more than 12%.
Exactly.
Because, the government likes to always, kid themselves. And when you say, when you and I say, well, if you're only offering 12% to housing to people with disabilities, that's a discriminatory policy. And it's like, well, don't you dare call it discrimination. Don't you dare call it discrimination. Well, that's what it is. That's what it is. You're cherry picking. It's cherry picked policies. If you look up the definition or the antonym, if you look up the antonym of cherry pick, it's like it translates to being indiscriminate is the antonym, which means opposite. Is the opposite of cherry pick is indiscriminate, which means the other way is discriminatory, right? And yet they say, well, cherry picking isn't discriminatory, and even our BC Human Rights Tribunal says cherry picking isn't discriminatory, and it's like our
that's why we got pink
unicorns are alive and well, because truth doesn't matter,
And here they are bigging themselves up like they're doing everybody a favor, and when they increase it like a small amount that still doesn't come close to the poverty line, they pat themselves on the back, like Jeff was saying, and say, "Oh my God, it's a once in a generation thing." It's like, you guys, it's literally your responsibility to enshrine and ensure and steward these rights that need to exist for the betterment of all. And for all of our communities. like this isn't like, oh, what a great favor we're doing for these people. No, this is your job. This is what you should be doing. This is what should be there in place, and the need for it is only going to increase. So yeah.
It's
exactly.
It's
we're
like
charitable, holistic, wraparound.
The government says, "Oh well, we increased it like 5 times since we formed government." Okay, it's like, well, hurrah, hurrah!
Good for you. It should be 2,200.
Standard, like no less.
Let's all drink Kool-Aid and eat cake.
Yeah,
or have
a brewed cup of coffee.
Drink the Kool-Aid and eat cake. And we'll just believe that our policies aren't discriminatory and aren't cherry picking and aren't everything else, and that the truth doesn't matter, and pink unicorns are fine. Pink unicorns aren't fine because pink unicorns aren't the truth. And
or basically saying, well, I'm sorry that you didn't get a rate increase this year, but if you've got a job, then that'll solve all the problems. Oh, you want housing? Market housing is too high? Well, go on the waiting list, get into BC housing, but you can be homeless first, and then you can get into BC housing. Really? Wow. Yeah.
It's been 30 years of legislated poverty, Brent. I'm starting to think that provincial governments don't really care to fix problems.
It seems that way.
I think we're starting to see a trend now. It's like a 30-year trend. It seems like they don't really want to fix anything.
And the fact that people realize this, and then they turn around and go, "Why does everyone hate us? What's with all this polarization? I don't get it." You don't.
What did we do wrong? What did we do wrong? I mean, but don't worry, vote for us. So we'll fix it. We'll fix the problem.
30 years of discriminatory policies is a bad thing.
I mean, look at this CRPD. I mean, what was it, brought in 2010?
No, it was 2010. Yeah.
I mean, those regulations. I mean, it means nothing because their government's not even complying with any of the regulations.
Well, and again, that's the whole point of the show is when they say, the targeted supports, like targeted wraparound supports, like you don't get to say that. You don't get to say that if it's just empty words of mean nothing words. Like, don't just say stuff to say stuff. Like, if you're gonna say targeted wraparound supports, like, mean it. And when I say mean it, that means acknowledging the truth of other targeted wraparound supports, like pensions. Yeah. So put your money where your mouth is. Walk the walk. No, don't just talk the talk, but walk the walk and say, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't claw back pensions because you know what? Pensions are a targeted wraparound support.
Yes.
Pensions are a targeted wraparound support. So maybe,
not to be all the UBI guy, but a wraparound support, money is one of the best fucking wraparound supports around. Sorry, pardon my French, but really.
So it's like you don't. They don't get to say targeted wraparound supports. I mean, that should be stricken from the record if they don't acknowledge what a targeted wraparound support actually is. Stop saying it because it pisses me off. Like I'm getting actually pissed off hearing it now, like all the time.
I mean, you see how many people that are in the tents that are down on Pandora Street, downtown Victoria. I mean, that area keeps growing and growing. It's like a whole city within itself. They're camped out in front of the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction Office. So you can't even go in.
Which is an amazing thing by itself. I mean, we're not doing our jobs. Look out the window, see?
I mean, you can't go in there because
it's a bit harsh, but
proof of concept here.
I mean, I was listening on the news, and there was weapons, and loaded guns, and knives, and drug paraphernalia everywhere. And now the city does a clean sweep, comes along and takes away their tent. There was a gentleman there. He lost his home because of affordability. I mean, no fault of his own. He's just a general, a citizen where things are just not affordable for him. So now, because he's in a tent, they took away his tent. Now they have to go and buy a new one. He's a person with disabilities. I mean, really, is that how we treat our people in society? So what happens now? They end up in my neighborhood, just down there, literally. I mean, I could probably skip a rock down there, and that's how close it is to the bus stop where I am.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they're camped out there every morning, folks, every morning.
Yeah.
Why? Because the city says they got to get them out of Pandora. Well, where are they going to go? They don't have housing. There's not. Some people, they don't want the shelter because they feel unsafe because of their living conditions. And so I get it. Like every individual person has their own stories. So like the city's now trying to figure out, well, how do we work with the government? The government says, well, how do we work with the city? Work together. I mean, figure out a plan here. Because it's like, I mean, I try to go shopping down there. Tom, you know the area because we've gone down there. And in the area now, they've escalated their security inside Save on Foods even more now. McDonald's is right there. I mean, they got wraparound security. Literally. And I got to know the security people in there because they actually go downtown McDonald's down on Douglas Street there too. They kind of fluctuate back and forth. They're like, hey, you're here.
That makes sense.
Why are you here? Well, because Pandora is getting pretty nasty. It's one of them actually almost got jumped the other day. So pretty scary stuff. Yeah, one of the security people. Just doing their job, right?
And it's because the government's not doing their job that it gets passed on to you and me and business owners. Like I've said before too. Like I actually own my condo, and we've had issues of homeless people trying to live down in the garage, and my heart goes out to them. But the fact of the matter is they create a huge mess, and they ended up costing us like thousands of dollars in cleanup costs. So that gets passed on to owners, and the government's just sitting there all going, oh well, it's fine. We'll just pass it on to Joe Blow, it's fine, or we'll just pass it on to the store owners that have to like beef up the security and have all these cameras.
Exactly.
But maybe we had
I'm just going to interject. I literally, one of the jobs I do, I work as a janitor, and one of the jobs I have, one of the contracts I have is downtown Victoria. It's a dealership, and by describing it, I'll probably lose some people as to where it is, because it's got a new iron fence all the way around it, like a big fencing thing, with like locks on, so I can get in and out. New alarm systems, stuff like that. Because of there's like a low income thing, and I think a needle exchange or something right there, and then Rock Bay Landing which is one of our bigger shelters, is just across the way. So we're kind of surrounded by it. So ever since then, it's kind of beefed up. But yeah, I get people that are camped right outside of like the two sides of the building, and there's more security sweeps, and it's just like all this stuff isn't free. Like when I'll be working in the one side of the building, and it's right next to it, and it's like the cops just do like a regular routine of going around that parking lot and back out. Then another gun comes in around the parking lot and back out, and fire trucks and ambulances, because they often go together for emergencies. This isn't free. Like comes back to what Scott Sanson says. Poverty isn't free. Like just letting it play its course isn't like cheap. You know.
Here's a scenario for anyone listening. What's going on? I'm glad you mentioned about that. The police now are having to arrive where the paramedics are showing up, because I was just going to mention about that. Is in Victoria, just recently. There was a paramedic that was assaulted by, unfortunately, it was really sad that it actually had to be that way, but a paramedic was assaulted by a homeless person who, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but so the paramedics and the fire department felt very uncomfortable having to deal with the situation. There was over 60 people that ganged up on all the paramedics at the time in downtown Victoria on Pandora Street. And so they now have basically made a decision that the police are now going to have to show up every time that there's an instance. So now the police have to get pulled out from wherever they are in the city, go down to wherever there's an issue. Again, it is a systemic problem that's breaking down in society, where we actually now have to have the police show up, because the paramedics can't be there as first responders to take care of a medical situation. The person was in medical distress, and I'll sum it up in that way, just to just protect the integrity of the scenario. which, I mean, it's sad, right? It shouldn't have had to be the way it was. But again, I mean, those are resources that now get taken up by the city, where if somebody's having a stroke or heart attack or other medical conditions that they need to have the paramedics show up at their residence, well, again, like now they're going to be dispatched where the police can't. They actually have to wait. They have to wait till they're actually told to show up. Like, so the police have to show up first to see if it's actually going to be safe. Then the paramedics can come in. Like, so people's lives are getting put on hold. I don't know. Like, there's something serious going on that needs to be resolved on that too. Again, I know Sonia and I, we talk about this all the time. She says, again, rates have to be increased. I mean, yes, that is the number one thing too, is we're putting more strain on our healthcare system by not dealing with a systemic issue in society. That's like one component. Get people the housing that they need. The word wraparound supports. I mean, or get them the housing. Work with the individual. Find out what their needs are on a one-to-one basis. Going through all the tents. What is the situation? Let's get them into permanent housing, not shelters. Let's get them into permanent housing. Get the medical attention that they need for each individual person. And then work at a solution-based something going forward. And people that are in market housing, let's work with them. This is kind of summarize the whole scenario. Let's work with the individual in market housing. Why is it their cost of living is so high? Work with them. I mean, I thought that's what the province said they were going to do, was work with the corporate sector and work with the public sector.
I was gonna say, Brent, it was time for closing comments, but you actually beat me to it. That was a good closing comment.
I was reading your mind, Neil.
So
But I mean, that's a good summary, is to work with the individuals and say, okay, like, how can we make your housing cheaper? What can we do? Where do you want to live? How do we work with you to make your housing cheaper? I look back at my hometown in Langley, Tom and Neil.
Yeah.
The listeners.
I live there too.
I mean, and the housing now is just way out of reach. It's just way out of reach. I could say, well, once upon a time it would be nice to live there. Now I look at the prices, well over $2,000. Like a whole PWD check, 2 PWD checks wouldn't be enough to actually even live there. I mean, all your money would go to rent, and then what? But of course, the government solution, and the closing comments, government solution. Well, you can get into BC housing, but you got to be homeless first. Well, the way the rents keep going up and up, I mean, your wish will come true, right? A person will be homeless and go, can I now have housing? Yeah, but you got to be on a waiting list. That waiting list now is over 20 years long. Oh, gee, I'll be, I don't know what health condition I'll be in at that time, 20 years from now. Oh my gosh, right.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, right?
But in the meantime, the government says, just get a job, though. But I had a job.
I had a job, and you took my pension away.
Yeah. So now what, right? How about a basic income? Basic income. Well, Tom will tell you about basic income. Tom, there you go.
Well, that's a whole other hour show, though, Brent.
Yeah.
I could be here for an hour.
Government. Tune into about basic income. We'll have Tom tell you all about how it all works.
Follow if you. I have let's see. I'm on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter at Basic BC. And basic income. Tom the BIVIC BC guy. You can follow me on Instagram. I have links to people like Scott Santons, Rutger Bregman, Carl Widerquist, Floyd Marinescu of UBI Works. Check, check out the Start Here playlist. It will run you through like kind of a greatest hits. And
I love those.
There's so many reasons for a basic income that the idea of not having a basic income is insane. I mean,
I love the content that you put out there, Tom. It's so informative, and it educates the public and the government. Oh, well, I mean, hopefully it educates the government, maybe if they'll read it. I watch the videos, maybe, but let's hope so. Yeah. But I know in society we can do this right. I mean, more automation's coming, and we know it. We see it. I see it all the time in all the grocery stores.
Skynet is around the corner.
I mean, you look at Save on Foods, for instance. I mean, more automation. You look at Dollarama. I mean, not even some cashiers whatsoever. Yeah, like none.
It's like one till and a whole bunch of machines.
Yeah, I mean, and I see I saw in Walmart one day, there was a lady working there. I felt sorry for her because she was running her feet off. The people needed help with scanning stuff. It wasn't scanning. It was overpriced and it wasn't the right price. So she had to do a correction on the pricing. Other people, they just wanted to check out. And I said, so here's the problem here, folks. Where's the cashiers? We need cashiers. But
they're run so cheaply. It's almost like one person said, like those kind of money mart things and dollar stores, they pretty much show up when things aren't working. That's pretty much, it's like, it's all about incentives. And when the incentives are bad, Dollarama starts showing up. Like, where
now they start charging the
staff.
The government has put in regulations in BC that all the stores can't charge any less than $2 for a reusable bag, and at 25 cents for a paper bag. Now, I went to Save on Foods just recently, and $2.49 now for a reusable bag. I was like, what? I looked at it twice. I'm thinking, so I took a picture and I showed Neil. I couldn't believe it. It was $2.49 for a reusable bag. Well, we had our own bags, but what if you don't have a bag? So what are you going to do is use a produce bag and start putting all your groceries into these produce bags because they're free for now. You look at all these plastic
my own rant is being a janitor, which is kind of hilarious because it's a job and everyone expects that job to be done. Guess what I go through dozens of per night? Bags. Heavy reinforced bags.
Exactly.
No one talks about that. No one's like, oh, we got to reduce the amount of bags. That doesn't happen. But at the grocery store, which is a light little thing that'll disintegrate underneath my sink, those are bad.
I have garbage bags at home that I have, and I got a whole big giant rolls of this stuff. I have to maybe take those to the grocery store instead. I mean, and those are not recyclable bags. No. But I use them though. I mean, I use them for garbage cans, and if one gets full and it's all clean garbage but not dirty garbage, I just dump from one into the other one, so I keep reusing it. Why not?
Yeah.
Because it's a responsible thing to do, right? I mean, but some of these big corporations, unfortunately, they're still not compliant. Look at McDonald's and Tim Hortons, plastic lids, but in some areas they got those ones that are biodegradable. They're breaking down. I think it was in Ontario. Ooh. And I said in one of the states,
we actually kept some plastic straws that I bought from a dollar store here in the old place because Cece hated the paper ones because they just collapse on you.
They disintegrate.
Exactly. You want to drink paper? I mean, as some of the stores that are using those paper straws now, it just I'll carry plastic ones with me. I remember when I was a kid, Tom. Before we end the segment, we had glass. Well, glass was dangerous for people. We need to get rid of glass. We need to go to paper. Well, I mean, and plastic. My mom would carry these groceries bags, and the whole bottom would fall through. She's like, "Oh, damn it!" I said, "What?" She goes, "Oh, how come the eggs are in there?" She goes, "Because they're scrambled." She said, "I'm like, oh, is that what we're having for lunch?" She got mad. She goes, "Go to your room. Go to your room." Well, I was joking, but she was pissed off because now I have to go back to the grocery store and go and buy more eggs. And then she was actually, you know what? Maybe the chickens have laid the eggs, so I had to go. And so she got mad, so she made me to go and collect the eggs because I guess I was being disrespectful. Whoops, So I had to go and collect it. I got pecked at it a little bit, but I got the eggs. But I mean, I guess the point of the matter is bags. I mean, a lot of them you can't even have handles to grab onto. Like, so what do you do when it rains out? They break down. Plastic. I mean, wow. So now we say, oh, well, we can't have plastic because there's a problem. Well, glass was a problem before too.
Yeah.
Gosh. Things that make sense, right?
And instead of being like in the ocean, these giant like islands of carrier bags.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Because we just throw them out as they get.
Maybe we can build an ark with all that stuff. Maybe.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was gonna sing us out with "We'll be there for you with wraparound supports. We'll be there for you to claw back your pension. We'll be there for you. So just get a job so we can claw back your pension."
And take away your CPP.
And take away your CPP and your EI and your workers' compensation because you don't deserve any of it because you're disabled. But don't call it discrimination.
We'll be there for you.
We'll be there for you with
you
our
to take your
wraparound
income tax
support.
job. What's the income tax money for? Well, it's for us because we would never give it to you.
That's right.
Or here's one. If I had $1 million,
we wouldn't give it to you because you don't deserve it.
Yeah. If I had $1 million, they'd claw all of it back.
That's right.
Yeah.
You barely deserve charity.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned to our next broadcast, and who knows what that topic will be.
Actually, it will be Dan. Dan is coming on Thursday with a very special. It's a very special broadcast, almost top secret broadcast. But we're going to be broadcasting live, even though it's top secret. We're still going to be broadcasting live. Yep. So tune in for that one.
And what time is that, Neil?
That'll be like early. I think Dan wanted to. Originally, it was going to be 9 a.m. Pacific, and I think he's going to bump it up to. It's going to be 10 a.m. Pacific. So it's 10 a.m. Pacific. Or 1 p.m. Eastern.
Okay, so I'll have the coffee brewing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, tune in for that for Thursday. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Thursday, August 1st, and tune in and listen to Dan Trey's announcements that he'll be putting out there. It's very important. He wants everyone to tune in. So Dan is in Ontario. So he's in Toronto Dan. If you look him up on Twitter, follow him along. Watch his YouTube channel. I always get his Twitter, his YouTube handle. DT 624. I hope I got that wrong.
624 or something. Yeah.
624. Anyway, sorry Dan if I messed that up. You can correct us on that comment on the video, but. Anyway, everyone knows who Dan is, I'm pretty sure. So definitely follow along on this channel and definitely tune in on Thursday, August 1st, bright and early in the morning for BC time, Pacific Daylight Savings Time, not Pacific Standard Time. And Eastern Time is 1 o'clock. And
thank you again for Tom and Jeff for joining today.
Thank you so much, both of you, Jeff. If you're listening later on, thank you so much for coming on and taking time and putting your comments out there for our listeners and viewers. Very important to get the message out that no one should be living below the poverty level in Canada, especially in British Columbia. We're supposed to be leading the country economically. Once upon a time, that's what was always said. I mean, whatever province wants to lead the country, show an example that we can get people up to a poverty level, no less than poverty level, and tie it to inflation. Does that mean that increasing disability rates, or does that mean give everybody a basic income? I would say give everybody a basic income, but in the meantime, get them up to raise your disability rates up to a standard, and then let's implement a basic income and just be done with that, because society going forward, we're going to need that. I mean, and Tom, well, I'm going to have you on another day, and we're going to we'll talk about the reasons why
you can talk everybody's ear off about basic income.
Yes, if anyone is interested in hear about basic income, Tom's going to be on very soon, and we'll make arrangements with you, Tom, to have you on after the 1st. Actually, no, you're going to be away.
Well, after the 1st, because
you're going to be away, and actually Brent is going to be away too pretty soon.
I'm going to be away too, but Tom, you and I can reconvene and find out when you're going to be back, and you and I we'll set up a time later in August. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
We'll set a time later in August, and we'll do an episode about basic income.
Okay.
Looking forward to it. But thanks everyone for in today. I hope you enjoyed today's show. I found it educational. Please, if you have, please subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate our viewership. Stay up to date on the content by subscribing, because then you're going to get the news feed that we're now live, or there's now a show coming up. Stay tuned over the month of August also, because Brent's going to be taking Brent and Sonia are going to be taking some time off also, as well as Tom. So Tom's not going to be on for a while.
I'm going to be here by myself.
Yeah, but
talking to nobody.
But I'll keep you entertained with some Breaking with Brent segments and some coffee time. And maybe there might be a travel segment put in there, maybe traveling with Brent. Maybe we'll see. We'll see what's happening with that one. I know Sonia's kind of like a little smirk on her face over there, but yeah. But yeah, definitely stay tuned for any upcoming shows after. But first of all, August 1st, Dan will be coming on, and then after that, stay tuned for any upcoming segments. Until our next broadcast. We'll see you then, everyone. Thanks.
Bye now.